Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wasahbihi ajma'in. Still as a chairperson, Panelist, Rafizi and Datuk Saifuddin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming here tonight to attend this forum. Big crowd tonight. Hopefully, our Datuk and maybe if you decide to change profession, you may want to come and join our faculty as lecturer, because I think if you're around, we always have 2 classes. Okay, some important targets as described by Cyrill just now of United Plan as presented to you here. Developed country by 2020, per capita income 15,000 US, and then deficit, reduction of deficit, and reduction of the repeat of that one there, reduction of government total debt, also maintenance of full money. And some of the targets, I don't want to go to the details here because of time. You can read them on your own. And some other points here. Now, I will mention some of these points as I go along, and then we will discuss whether these are attainable or achievable or not. spend less now that you found out that you have to spend more than what you planned. Went up again to 15 billion, and went up to 18 billion. So this shows that it's not going to be easy for the government to control their expenditures. But the track record shows that in the past, it's always the government's plan or actual expenditure never meets its plans. And then we also may have other unplanned expenditures. For example, you may have external shocks in the form of global economic slowdown or regional economic slowdown. You may also require expenditure to help victims of natural disasters, and also expenditures to overcome effects of man-made disasters. This will be in the form of collapse in the property markets, and this one here. And this one here, I think I will let the professor of MBB to explain afterwards. I found this data when I was looking for probability of default based on City Express, which is the insurance to cover the probability of government not honoring debt. As you can see, this is Malaysia's probability, which is quite high compared to this is Germany in comparison. So out there, the financial market is not so confident when compared to Germany. Now, what about other countries experiencing managing deficits? Maybe we are planning. Is it really easy to control deficits? What about other countries? They also plan. They also have financial plans. And how do they fare in terms of controlling their deficits? Let's take a look. Maybe that can give us some lessons. As you can see here, this is Spain. Misses the budget deficit target. That shows that it's not so easy, even for a country, developed country that's got excellent planners. This is Ireland, also a target missed because of deficit. This is France, also missed their target. So in other words, I'm just saying that all these things about trying to make deficit targets actually sometimes are just political statements in order to pacify voters. But in reality, most countries are not able to control their expenditures. Now, what about employment? The government plans to maintain full employment with an estimated unemployment rate of 4.8% by 2020, and also trying to create jobs as well. But the developments out there doesn't look too promising, right? This is the latest if we found out from the news. So what about this? So we may want to plan, but the job market is actually not being able to control in many cases. Quantized. This is BlackBerry, right? And this is a very strong company. As you know, a couple of years ago, even President Obama was using BlackBerry. But now they are slicing jobs. So if other international companies are not able to maintain employment and to lay off people, what about Malaysian companies? Sony, again, 10,000 jobs. So unemployment targets are actually very, very elusive, dependent on demand level, dependent on global demand, and of course, we are also dependent on the Chinese economy. Let's take a look at how dependent we are on the Chinese economy. This is the total trade by major countries, Malaysia's major trading partners. As you can see, China and Singapore are our biggest trading partners. So we are very dependent on China. This is exports and imports by major countries. Again, you can see China here and Singapore are our major exports and import partners. And here, Singapore, what about Singapore's trading partners? You can see the main export destinations are Malaysia and China, and the main source of imports are China and Malaysia. So in other words, we depend on Singapore, and Singapore depends on China here. So China is a is where we are all dependent on. So what does that imply? Take a look at this. This is China Daily, about what's happening in China. Economy outlook still bleak, one bank. So Chinese economy is actually very, very fragile at the moment. This is the reason why the debts in China are increasing. The local government debts increased a lot. Debt to GDP increased steadily from 32.9% all the way up to 53.5% in 2012. So that is the reason why the Chinese economy is actually very, very fragile, very, very dependent on debts. Chinese debt situation is very high for a developing country. These are the figures of their debt situation of all the corporate sector, government sector, and household. And therefore, analysts fear China financial crisis may be happening in the coming years. And if that happens, that's going to have a very negative effect on the Malaysian economy. So this is you can see the Chinese real GDP growth going down very drastically since 2005 to 2015. And we are dependent on this economy. And this is the economist's explanation of the whole situation in China. As you can see, the single most important development has been its credit needs. This is the reason why China grew in the past few years, because of credit. And when it depends on credit, it will not last. Anything can happen. Right? So this, according to the economists, this is the reason why we may have problems in China in the coming years. Let's take a look at some other countries to know when a country is very dependent on credit, what can happen to their economy. This is Ireland. This is a very, I don't want to go long, but I just want to highlight to you. This is the start of Europe before. They were growing like crazy, everyone was praising them, but unfortunately they were dependent on credit when they grew. So what happened was, it crashed in 2000. Actually grew very fast from 1995 to 2002. It was increasing, productivity was increasing. So this may be what we are experiencing now. But what happened was, it was a bubble economy waiting to burst. So the boom was between 2002 to 2007, but later on what happened was they were very dependent on the property market, and a lot of their government revenue was based on the property market. But the property market bubble burst, they were in trouble. So it went down. The revenue went drastically down in case of the Irish economy. Okay? And unemployment went up. The unemployment went up like crazy from 2007 onwards. So this is some explanation of the bubble economy of Ireland, how it burst and resulted in very massive unemployment over there in Ireland. Collapsed totally in 2007. Okay. And in November, the yields from Irish government debt reached 9%, which was very difficult for them to pay. Spanish government, same thing. It was a housing bubble, property boom before the crash, and they were building things like airports and swimming pools, etc., etc. One airport in Valencia was built, and not a single plane has ever landed in that airport. So it was a crazy property boom, building using credit, and as a result, it crashed and unemployment went up. As you can see here, the unemployment is actually 50% for people under 25, and poverty went up like crazy. And this can happen to China and also Malaysia. Now this is the situation of credit in Malaysia at the moment. As you can see, this is one of the worst in the world in terms of household debt. This is the household debt to income ratio in developing economies. We are higher than United Kingdom. This is Malaysia here. This is United Kingdom level. This is United States level. These are all the other countries. So we have a very bad situation of household debt. compared to income. Household debt has been growing from 72.6% of GDP in 2005, now it's 83.4% last year. Okay, most are for properties, etc. And these are and GST is making people suffer more because of the increased expenditure. And this is a study done by basically, as you can see, GST impact on household expenses has gone up by 20% in transport, etc. Right. The only one that came down was in terms of recreation. Okay. But the rest went up. So everybody is feeling the effect of GST on top of their debt level or debt servicing that they have to do every month. So even if income rises, cost of living is going to increase too and may result in increased urban poverty. And poverty level in Malaysia, according to the government statistics, has actually remarkably gone down from 49.3% to 0.6% to 0.4%. But then we use absolute poverty line income of 763, meaning that if you earn 780, you are no longer poor. Which is a big money. But if you use another definition of poverty called relative poverty line, which is 50% of median income of 1,118, the rate is actually 20%. Now, these are some other developed, or they call high income countries in terms of their OECD poverty rates. As you can see, they are quite high too, 13%, 11%. In other words, this is high income country, 20% up there. So over in the high income countries, poverty level is actually quite high too. Meaning even if you grow to be a high income countries, apparently poverty is not easily addressed. Okay. And then we have other problems. These are photos that I got from the United States. High income countries, they are also suffering. Over there, you don't have a PhD. So the reason why some of you are having good jobs is because you are not highly developed yet. If you are highly developed, maybe you have double PhD. Maybe I'm not sure whether YB Rasmi want to continue with this PhD. This is Japanese poverty situation, which is really bad. Also Greece and other high income countries. I showed Spain just now. What about Singapore? This is something I want to share with you, my observation of Singapore, where people talk about it's lagging behind Singapore. Singapore is a developed country. So is it really nice over there in Singapore? It's actually the world's most expensive city, according to one study. And people are very upset over there because they cannot afford. There was a mass protest against fair hike recently in 2014. And this is what I want to show you, a comment made by a Singaporean. Said, we have now cracked into the top 3 countries in Asia for having the highest cost of living, and yet our wages have stagnated for the past few years due to various reasons. 300,000 Singaporeans now earn only 1,380 and below a month, making them the bottom 50% of the working population. And this is rental rate in Singapore. Look at again, the income is 1,380 per month. But look at this. This is the rental rates in Singapore. The cheapest is Reflex, and the rental rate is Singapore 3,000, right? But the income is 1,380. So how are they going to survive? So this is what happens in a developed country. By the way, I want to share with you some of the statistics about the implication of the developed country. This is a map of country by fertility rate. As you can see, Singapore has got the lowest fertility rates in the world. It's 0.78 child per family. The head is missing. That's less than 1%. So these are all the so-called high-income countries. As you can see, they are about 1%, one child per family or less. So the more developed a country, the more likely for population to become extinct. Apparently, that's the indication. So So how come there are still problems after achieving a developed status, which Malaysia is very crazy about, as reflected in the National Malaysia Plan? Anyway, Professor Robert Jansen, University of Texas, Austin said, we need to recognize that the crises we face are not simply the result of greedy corporate executives or corrupt politicians, even though corrupt politicians make life very difficult for us. But actually, the main reason is because of failed systems. And according to Professor Noam Chomsky, MIT, he said, the system is not working. Right? So this is something which I want all of us to think about. The system is not working, and therefore, even if you achieve a developed status, if the system is not working, people will still suffer. Professor Robert of Harvard University did say that perhaps scholars who argue that Islamic financial system prohibition on interest generate massive acquisitions ought to be looking at the system for positive ideas that Western policymakers might adopt. So one of the reasons, of course, because under that system, you may not have that such a high credit level, or what's called credit pinch, which we saw just now. One of the reasons, or the main reason for the crisis in Spain, Greece, going to happen in China, also happened in America. So conclusions. Meeting the 11 development target is going to be a big challenge. A debt-based economy is not sustainable and crisis-prone. We need to retain the development objectives of our country. We need to avoid preoccupation with achieving high income status. As you can see, they are not going to guarantee prosperity. Focusing on the Malaysian Development Index, easy to start. It's part of the 11 Malaysia Plan mentioned in there somewhere. But more importantly, in my opinion, freedom to discuss and debate issues is the most important that we need at the moment.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. He was asking me whether I would like to speak while sitting down or standing up. I told him I'm a politician on sabbatical. I wish to stand again. Let me start by congratulating the Dean, Professor Nazari and Brother Amal, for inviting this forum. Both Rafizi and I are not available for forum in all public universities. We are lucky to be able to come to UM tonight. Thank you all. Professor Nazari has given us an overview of the 11 Malaysia Plan. I'm not a professor or an economist like him. I will not try to be clever because I don't have a CGPA of 3.85. So I will just say as it is. I like the way Professor Nazari conclude his presentation by alluding to the importance of having debates on public policies. And that reminds me that the 10th Malaysia Plan was actually the first 5-year plan that, according to the DG of EPU at that time that I was still a member of Parliament, that was the first time that the EPU actually consulted the state. The state will be the UPENs. Yeah? So that's quite, I was like, quite what? And I hope and I believe that for the 11 Malaysia Plan, some kind of dialogue, I know there was some dialogues, and I hope it was done more extensively compared to RMP 10. There were lots of expectation while waiting for the announcement or the launch of the 11 Malaysia plan. Some people were already asking about, no, the expectation is not whether this is the last lap or not the last lap. That's less important. I think what is more important is people were trying to, people were expecting that there could be a clear new framework or new worldview or new approach to planning the economic development of the country. And there are various reasons why there were a lot of expectation, partly because of the discourses of GE13, both before, during, and immediately after GE13. There were lots of conversation among Malaysians on the kind of Malaysia that they aspire to have. Partly because for the first time we have the Malaysia Human Development Report for 2013, and people were actually having some kind of ammunition in waiting for 11 Malaysia plan, and so on and so forth. So the moment the 11 Malaysia plan was announced, the first thing that come to people like me would be, has the plan asked the hard questions that people have been talking about for the past couple of years? Has the plan actually defined the kind of society that we, and by we I mean ordinary Malaysians, dream of having? It remains a question mark, unless of course we were to look into that very thick document that was launched. But honestly speaking, I think, and this is not about numbers or about strategy, one of the problems is that the 11 Malaysia plan was launched while the government is suffering from trust deficit, which make it very difficult for the government to explain the plan and to convince the people that this is actually a good policy document. We already have critics, and I just put two important ones. One is, of course, Nazari. He questioned about the point on increasing the average income from RM 2,500 a month to RM 5,000 a month. Our friend at the back, Dr. Lee Hock On, he went further by saying that some of the goals are based on flawed foundations. He used a very interesting term, statistical doping. My first reaction to the plan was when I looked at the numbers used to define the bottom 40. And the number used is actually based on that 2,500 average income per month. My worry is this is what is on paper, but when it comes to implementation, then the number that is going to be used is the 3,000 ringgit per month, which is the number used for payment. Now, what will happen then to all the calculations? But on the positive side, I'm going to be positive. I think the main theme of the 11 Malaysia plan is inclusiveness. Dr. Kamal Saleh said that about 1/3 of the plan is about inclusiveness. I don't have the number, but I thought inclusiveness is the main theme. It is not limited only within thrust number 1, which is about inclusivity, but I think it's also represented the very idea or the whole idea of inclusiveness is also represented in many of the other trusts, like on the well-being and so on and so forth. Now, this is probably the first time that the 5 Malaysia plan put a lot of emphasis on the bottom of the pyramid. A phrase that was coined, if I'm not mistaken, by Cyrill Ponnu back in 2005, the late Cyrill Ponnu. But in the implementation of this idea of inclusiveness, I think the implementers, the decision makers, the people who are involved in the day-to-day running of the plan, in all agencies, especially government agencies, must be convinced that there is a certain framework involved in attending to and addressing to this approach called inclusiveness. It's not just, oh, we want to be inclusive, therefore, blah, 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 blah. It's not as simple as that. It has its own philosophical background. People like Pierre, this French guy, Pierre Calam, talks about revisiting the 18th century family economy or household economy. He used the term economy back in 2009 in discussing his way of solving some of the problems of the capitalist system or the failure of the current financial architecture, if you like. There is such thing known as social business, social enterprise, and this has got something to do with what was shown by Professor Nazari, what happened in some countries, what we know as the Occupy movement, what we understand as the we 99 as opposed to the 1% at the top of the income group. All I'm trying to say is it's not as easy as saying we have to be inclusive, but we must understand that inclusiveness has its own philosophy, has its own framework. This inclusivity approach will fail if the people who are entrusted to run it do not understand the difference between social business and social enterprise. For instance, that social enterprise has got its own meaning, it's not conventional enterprise, and so on and so forth. However, I am also a little not very happy with the fact that because I was expecting some kind of announcement that the government will start a migration from race-based policies to needs-based policies. I'm a little disturbed with the Bumiputra agenda inside there. I'm not anti-Bumiputra, don't quote me wrongly, but perhaps there is another way of presenting it without having to use the Bumiputra paradigm. Yeah? Now, when it comes to attending to the poor, increasing their income, I think we have to revisit some of the programs that are already on the ground. Some are actually quite effective. Some of the microcredit or social enterprise program like Amanah Ikhtiar Malaysia is quite remarkably run, I must say. But there must be a serious effort in graduating the participant from microcredit to something else. I have a problem with, because I thought the plan is very gung-ho by saying that we can increase their income and hence they will be part of the middle class. Now I find that a little gung-ho, a little over-optimistic. Yes, it is everybody's aim that our middle class cohort will be bigger and stronger, but the wordings, unless of course if I misread it, but I think we have to. That is not the kind of target that I'm looking at. I think that's over-optimistic. Yes, we should try to enhance, strengthen the microcredit, but there must be a real graduation process of these people. Likewise, there is some statement about looking at the construction sector, and again, there is the issue of the Class F contractors. The fact that some people have more than 10 licenses. I don't know where they come from. Maybe they belong to a certain political party. But I think we have too many Class F contractors for the country. And it has its own relation to problems about illegal immigrants. Yeah, we can go into detail, and if you were to inspect the state of the construction sector. What about then the private sector? I am, Mr. Chairman, concentrating on the inclusiveness part of the plan. I think we should encourage the private sector to migrate from the CSR paradigm, corporate social responsibility paradigm, towards more of a social enterprise paradigm. The CSR paradigms mean you can do whatever you want, you get as much profit as you like, and then at the end of it, you give back. If I use the hypermarket as a illustration, for every hypermarket that is newly established in a certain place, there is an estimated about 100 small traders would have to gulung tikar. Once that hypermarket make a lot of profit, then, you know, dengan photographer and everything, okay, I'm giving back, you know, welfare, charity, and so on and so forth. Charity is good, philanthropy is good, but what about that 100 small traders who gulung tikar? What I mean by moving to social enterprise, we probably have to enact a new law or approach that hypermarkets, before they decide to start, they have to work with, say for instance, a local civil society organization, a local business organization, especially those represented or those who comprises members who are the small traders. Work with them, ensure two things, that number one, they don't gulung tikar, and number two, the 15%, there is this regulation about 15% local products must be on the shelf of the hypermarket. First, you must ensure hypermarket don't start their own SMEs. Yeah, it's like a right pocket paying the left pocket. But make sure that these 100 or about that people would then be the potential contributor to the 15% of the local product. So we need to move from CSR. I'm not saying we must, I'm saying we need to migrate from the CSR paradigm to more of a SE or social enterprise paradigm. Now, when it comes to inclusiveness, I'm happy that Professor Nazari spoke about the well-being. Part of the chapter on well-being talks about harmony and talks about unity, and I think this is something that is very dear to all of us. I don't want to go into detail, but let me then go into what was touched by Professor Nazari on government expenditure. I think government must ensure two things. Number one, that we are more prudent in our spending. We decide properly what we need to buy and what we don't need to buy. Aeroplane or whatnot. Rafizi was whispering to me when he looked at the data shown by Professor Nazari. He said that does not include the year 2013 and 2014. So I'm not sure whether he is referring to the buying of the jets. On the one hand, the government must be very prudent in its spending. On the other hand, we need to fight corruption in a more genuine and serious manner. How do we do this? I think the least the government can do is two things. Number one is to declare a white line. I call it a white line. Netanyahu used the red line for nuclear in Iraq. A white line is like, it's almost similar to what Hong Kong did at one time, where you decide on a date, you decide that, okay, from today onward, no more of those, whatever that has happened in the past. So a white line has to be declared. Yeah? And whistleblowers like Rafizi must be protected. Secondly, and this is not rocket science, because it's already there, but it has not been utilized to the full. We must ensure that e-procurement technologies and e-bidding technologies, I'm talking about the real e-bidding and e-procurement technology that is transparent, that limits to the extent of almost impossible in the context of human intervention in all government procurement and all government bidding. The systems are already there, including the GLCs. Yeah, the system. GLC went through a transformation program when Tan Sri Azman Mokhtar came in as the MD. 6 points or 5 points, and that includes this spend management technology, e-bidding and e-procurement. I happened to work in a company before I became a politician, where our flagship product was e-procurement and e-bidding. And for the companies that were using our system, or for that matter, if they are not using our software, they were using other people's software, most companies save up to 20, sometimes up to 30%. I dare not calculate how much we can save on government spending, but I can tell you it's going to be a lot of money. Because it is transparent, no way, no envelope, no nothing. Now, what is not mentioned in RMK 11 when it comes to inclusivity is about participatory decision-making process. What is mentioned in the plan is that there will be some kind of transformation for the public service, that there will be greater engagement with local community and NGOs and empowering local authorities. Now, my take is, if what has happened in the past is by any means can be a standard, and I give you 2 examples. The AG and the Bar Council, in their consultation for the Peace Assembly Act, and the JPA and QPAC in their earlier consultation for the new salary scheme, I don't think government really understand the meaning of engagement and consultation. They have to prove beyond doubt that they really understand the meaning of participatory decision-making process. I'm talking about the need for a new governance framework. Integrity is part of it, but a new governance framework where the government is open to non-state actors, to civil society, to professionals and whatnot, on a regular basis, on an agreed upon ground rules. There must be some ground rules. You don't just consult for nothing, but to ensure that inputs from non-state actors, particularly the business and the civil society, the academia and so on, are taken into consideration when decisions are made. In most cases, government look at consultation as I have informed you, I have briefed you. No, that's not consultation. Consultation has got 3 basic ground rules. One is the full understanding of empowerment. Second is on representation, and third is on participation. Some political science use the term deliberation. We are entering into political terminologies like participatory democracy, deliberative democracy, and something like that. What then will be the real game changer? And this is my last submission. Because the 11 Malaysia plan talks about 6 game changers. One of which have got something to do with the transformation of the civil service, which I agree. But I think the real game changer would be transformation of institutions. The 11 Malaysia plan talks about transforming public service, which will include like enhancing service delivery, strengthening talent management, but we must make sure that these are all based on, say for instance, meritocracy. There is now an inclusion of a new policy, which is very important, the exit policy. But the question is, how will it be implemented? How long will it be taken? Is it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or kasih chance sampai dia pension? Exit policy pension. You know? Or you have an exit policy where he or she is not being promoted, but neither action is taken for whatever period. And for the civil servant, I would strongly propose that the government prepare a white paper for a total transformation of the civil service, which would include 4 major thrusts. One, on integrity, and this is again not rocket science because it's already there. The plan integrity, national integrity plan is already there. During last time, we launched the Institute of Integrity in Malaysia. It's all there. It's just about implementation. The second task is about having that new governance framework from the federal to the state to the local government, including, of course, bringing back local government election. The third is about innovations in decision making, in co-opting inputs from the rakyat, and the fourth one is about progressive talks in administration or management. Now, the UK civil service. And I'm using the UK civil service as an example because we follow many of the UK system. The UK civil service in the past 15 years, or at least from the time of Margaret Thatcher, have undergone 2 huge transformations. But this transformation was not done behind closed doors. It was debated, like you debate public policies. And inputs were coming from everyone. I'm not saying it is good, but that is the kind of example, if you were to emulate, that we need to have a total civil service transformation. Because what happened in the past 1 decade or so is that we have this kind of paradigm that if we think that the civil servants are not doing very well, I must please don't misquote me. I'm not saying the civil servants are not good. They are excellent. They are very good. Yeah, makan kacau kan? No, but we have problems. We have issues, and this is why I say we need to do the transformation. I choose the term transformation lah. Rafizi dia pakai reform, so dia punya hal lah. But one thing to say is this. I think in the last 10 years, our paradigm is this. If we are not happy with the civil servant, then we started something else. Or we bring in consultants. I'm not against consultant, but you see, here is the elephant in the room. We are not touching it. We have a problem. We are not solving it. We sidestep the problem by establishing other things. For instance, other whatever lah. But the civil servants is still an issue that we should deal with. And then 5 years down the road, we have another problem. We started another one. But the elephant in the room is still not addressed. That's what I'm trying to say. And what will happen then? You demotivate the civil servant. Now, if Professor Nazari talks about the system must work. The system is built around the civil servant, the institution, the government departments and agencies, of course with others. But this issue has to be addressed. So we really need to look at the civil servants. They have done a hell of a good job in the past. We need to motivate them, just like we need to motivate our teachers. And we have to solve some of the problems that they are facing. And that is why I'm calling for a total transformation of the civil service and its institution. And for that, I think we need a white paper. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, so I call upon YB Rafizi Ramli to give his views.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good evening, Saudara Cyrill, moderator for the night, two of my seniors, by seniority, they are the same batch, Dr. Nazari dan juga Datuk Saifuddin. I would have loved if Ustaz Fatul here, saya dah hafal hadis semua. It's an honor to be here. Almost 10 years ago in this very same hall. Last time to give a talk on accounting, way back, I think that was in 2005. Thank you to the organizer for giving me a mic. Jangan lantas saya tak ada suara. It's not very easy to conduct a session at night on 11 Malaysian plan, or as if this is an economy lecture at 9:45 at night. So I'll try to go, and if I were you, I wouldn't be here at your age. I don't know why you are here. Dia bagi point lebih. So let me go through very quickly. Not so much from economic perspective only, but I suppose hopefully to have an understanding from a layman's point of view, not just on 11 Malaysian plan, but where are we heading economically, and more importantly as a country in the future. I was there in 2010 when Datuk Sri Najib also presented the 10 Malaysian, not as an MP but as a speechwriter. So I remember very closely and vividly what was presented to the Parliament and to the public. The same Prime Minister expounded his vision for the country in 2010. As always, when we have a 5-year plan or any economic plan like this, the best place to start is to compare how the previous plans have been achieved. It's really pointless to talk about the future if we are not able to gauge how well we have done in the past. And this is 11 Malaysian plan. We have not done very well since the last 3 or 4 Malaysian plans indeed. That's why I would like to start by going through some of the targets and objectives. Sebab rancangan Malaysia ni dia dah jadi macam skrip sama, diulang-ulang-ulang. Yang ditukar hanya nombor-nombor di sana. They would start by saying these are our targets, and then they would tell what are the thrusts. And I think kalau you jadi consultant yang buat spec or the presentation paper, all you need to do is just cut and paste and change some photos and numbers. But the 11 Malaysian plan presented last week put a modest target of 5.6% growth for the next 5 years. This is important. Don't focus on this growth, but focus on how the growth target has been formulated and how much we have achieved over the last 15 years. In the 8th Malaysian plan, let me check. In the 8th Malaysian plan, I have the numbers here. In the 8th Malaysian plan, which was for the year 2001 and 2005, all the way to 2005, the growth target, average growth target that needed to be achieved every year in order for us to achieve developed nation by 2020, the RMK8 growth target was 7.5%. Remember now, 11 Malaysian plan is being lowered to 5.6%, when about 15 years back, the target, or 10 years back, the target was 7.5% per year. What did we achieve? In between 2001 to 2005, not a single year that this government had succeeded to achieve 7.5% growth target. In fact, the average growth target in between that period was only 4.7%, a far cry from the 7.5% that was touted initially, of course, when the 8th Malaysian plan was presented in all its glory in 2000 by Mahathir. And then we need to go to 9th Malaysian plan, with a new Prime Minister. For the year 2006 to 2010, the Barisan Nasional Government for 9th Malaysian plan has targeted 6% average growth rate. 06, 07, 09, 08. Basically, how they set the target is very simple. In order to achieve developed nation, you need to achieve a certain economic size measured by gross domestic product. Now they are talking about GNI, gross national income, and so on. But basically, you have a target. If you achieve that target in terms of economic size, then you consider yourself a developed nation. So what they do after that is basically work backwards. If you are in 2006, if you needed to be there in 2020, how much growth rate every year you needed to achieve? For 2006 to 2010, the target was 6%. Guess what was the average growth rate in between that period? Even lower. If for the 8th Malaysian plan, Malaysia only achieved 4.7, it came down even lower to 4.2% for 9th Malaysian. For the 10th Malaysian plan, Datuk Sri Najib set the target at the same pace, 6% annual growth rate for us to achieve 2020. For 2011, we achieved 5.2% below target. 2012, 5.6% below target. 2013, 4.7% below target. 2014, 6%, the only one on the dot. And 2015, most probably in between 4.5% to 5.5%. Kalau ini adalah pencapaian pelajar-pelajar universiti, you dah lama kena buang di universiti. Gagal. Because you did not pass out of 5 years, you pass 1 tahun, itu pun on the dot 6%. So for the 10th Malaysian plan, yet again, obviously we will fall behind the target. Instead of the 6%, most probably looking at the numbers, we'll be achieving on the low 5%. That is sebab itu, I'm not surprised this time around. I think Datuk Sri Najib has learned a bit not to be over optimistic with targets because people can count, unlike some UMNO members. Not Datuk Saifuddin lah, he can count. That's why for the 11th Malaysian plan, the target has been lowered to 5.6% average growth rate from 2016 to 2020. Now, do you actually see the slide of the target? From 7.5% down to 6%, down to 5.6%. Not that it is too bad, because it's only natural that as your economy grows better and larger, obviously the growth rate actually flattens as well. But what I'm concerned is that there seems to be a correlation between the inability to achieve target and then, the doping of the number or the massaging of the target in order to make sure that as we near 2020, at least the picture will be a lot better than in previous Malaysian plans. So that's on the growth rate, one of the most important gauge of how far we are going. The second target that Datuk Sri Najib has presented last week in Parliament is on the average monthly household income. 11 Malaysian plan put a target of 10,540 ringgit of average monthly household income by 2020. I have to take credit for this. And saya takkan malu to take credit for this. Because I think the first political party in this country which talked about the need to move away from the obsession with growth target to a household income is PKR. When we first presented our proposal and say that stop talking about 30% Bumiputra equity, stop talking about 6% growth rate, because it doesn't translate to the people on the ground. What really measure how people on the ground are doing is how much do you earn per month. And in 2011 we presented, and it was actually included in Buku Jingga, that our economic plan put a target to achieve 4,500 ringgit household income within the first 5 years of our rule. You know apa cara orang BN cakap? Dia kata bodoh semua. 5-6 years ago, when PKR talked about household income as the most important economic measure, people in Pakistan poo-poo everything just like that. And now, 4 years later, seperti biasa, dia ciplak tak bayar royalty kat kita. But I'm glad, because at the very least, there is a shift in the way we look at economic growth. Because the obsession on growth, 6% growth, actually does not address the more important economic issues in this country, which is the disparity between the rich and the poor, or in Malay, kesenjangan. You can have the 10 richest men in the country making up 80% of the income, compared to the 90% of others only sharing the balance of the 20 or 10% economic pie. That has always been the case. Sebab itu, in the past, every time people or government talks about 6% growth, we have hit this GNI and so on, it means nothing to the people. Because every month when they go and withdraw their salary, by the time they want to withdraw their salary, there's only 200-300 left in the bank account. It's worth for PTPTN lah, tak ada langsung lah. So that's why not that I'm too happy that they just ciplak without acknowledging it, but at the very least, I think there is a realization on the part of Barisan Nasional and the civil servants that the economic plan for the country must be more people-centered and must recognize what really transpired on the ground. Take for example GST. You can't go around and keep telling that GST menurunkan harga barang. Orang gila cakap macam itu. Because everyone knows on the ground harga barang naik, So the discipline for the top leadership, for the senior civil servants to understand and to take into account what really transpired in the ground is extremely important. I'm not too concerned about the 10,540 ringgit target, because I don't think it will be achieved. And I think it's a joke, because when we presented 4,500, the end poo-poo it as unrealistic. Now they are putting almost more than double of the figure that we put before. So it's not so much the target. I'm quite sure bila adik-adik semua kerja berkahwin 2020, gaji adik-adik bukan 10,000. Quite sure about that. But I think at the the very least, there is a change and shift in terms of our approach to economic planning. This is the first time the BN government actually included a target on household income in the Malaysian plan. Now, the third one, which is very relevant to all of you, is actually inflation, which Professor Nazari has actually presented in the slide. The government is targeting a 3% inflation throughout the period. You are an economics student, I'm sure you know how inflation is calculated. Our inflation is basically a basket of goods, and it does not differentiate between localities. Everything is put together in a pool. So the 3% has always been the most conservative number of what actually people have to pay on the ground. Yeah? So nowadays, I think the inflation stays at below 3% anyway. For the last few years, inflation has always stayed below 3%. But you go and ask orang kampung, keluarga, you ask them, does price actually grow at 3%? A survey done by Malaysia Kini on the effect of GST showed that in certain groups of products and services, the increase has reached almost 20% within a matter of a month. Saya beli ubat batuk tadi, ubat batuk daripada kedai Cina. Dulu saya beli dalam 6 bulan lepas, harga dia RM16. Today saya beli harga dia RM26. That's not 3%. So the 3% average inflation target, I am beginning to feel a bit annoyed because it really does not reflect and represent what happens or what the public and the rakyat have to go through. And the problem, if you keep putting an unrealistic and unrepresentative inflation target like this, the top policy makers confined in their top offices in Putrajaya, the ministers in all their expensive suits, will begin to lose touch of what really happens and what really 100 ringgit can buy every month. So if you keep thinking with your number and your spreadsheet that everything is fine and it's 3%, without understanding and testing that 3% means nothing to our consumers, then we will continue to have flops and mistakes like GST. I think that one of the reasons why BN fumbled heavily in introducing GST, because everything was decided based on projection and numbers on spreadsheet. It is true, if you go and measure, obviously people feel that from 3% it will just go up to about 3.8 and it will come down to about 3.5, and then there was only one shot up, maybe 5% spike in the first year, and then the spike will normalize. You know, it looks good on paper, and that's also a reminder to academics, myself included, as being PhD, that there is a very big difference between what we see on paper and what we simulate on paper and what a 3% or 4% really means to the people on the ground. And that's why I think one of the worst part of these numbers and target is the inflation target of 3%, because based on this inflation 3%, for the last 10-15 years, our economies have been planned, and out of that have produced numerous mistakes that burden the public, including the removal of subsidies, including the introduction of GSTs, and many other things. So if Barisan Nasional, should they remain there in the next 1 or 2 years, continue to plan our economy with a 3% growth target, they will, inflation target, they will remain utterly insensitive to the plight of the people, of our consumers. So this is one thing which I will bang very heavily tomorrow in my speech in Parliament. I think they need to wake up and smell the coffee. Nobody believes on the 3% inflation. Right. The third one is, the fourth. The fourth is the growth according to Datuk Sri Najib, will be driven by private investments, which is expected to grow at 9.4% per year. I don't have the latest number of investments growth, and even then I think you really have to drill really deep in order to make sure that it's really representative. But one of the ways to really see whether our private investments are growing and providing jobs at the same rate or at the same pace that the government is expecting is by looking at the number of projects, industrial projects that MIDA have been approving. Because a lot of these will involve foreign investments. So it kind of gives you the feeling, the number of projects give you the feeling whether there's a lot of excitement in the private sector. Okay, and these are not property projects. That's why we look at MIDA. Because if you look at project as a whole, then if a lot of those projects are property related, it doesn't really contribute in the way that we want the private sector to drive the economy. Like number ataupun jumlah kelulusan projek industri oleh MIDA telah berkurang dari satu tahun ke satu tahun. In 2011, the number of project was 910. 2012, 846. 2013, it dropped to 804. By the time for 2014, it dropped even lower to 787, and up to June 2014, which is the latest number so far, it barely reached 400. Do you see the trend? The trend of industrial projects by private investors keep coming down over the years. So while I don't think anyone will dispute that our economy has to be driven by private sectors, which I will elaborate a bit longer after this. But the growth rate of 9.4% doesn't seem to correlate to the kind of actual industrial activities on the ground powered or driven by the private sector. What is dangerous to all of you and to all of us, when the government actually puts too high a target in order to make the plan seems workable, in a country like Malaysia, where a large portion of our private sector is actually public's money and government-linked companies, there is always a danger that in order to hit the target, then the money will be diverted into projects and run and operated by the GLCs and GICs, government investment fund. And it's very dangerous because we should be looking at more and more private sector taking higher and higher stake in our economy, but instead, because of the existence of a very large GLCs and government investment funds, it is very easy to always ask these GLCs to just do more projects, whether or not they are profitable, whether or not they are economically viable, whether or not they are economically matched with our country is secondary, so long as it's considered as private sector investment, because GLCs and government investment funds are still categorized as private sector. In fact, that was the problem with the government economic transformation program, the ETP. Ingat tak dulu, tiap malam aku kena dengar lagu ETP kat sini. Less and less of that nowadays. But in the beginning, when ETP was launched, it's all about this ETP, private sector will contribute this much, this billion and that billion. When you drill down the number, you will realize a lot of those so-called entry point projects, EPPs, were basically designed to be driven by the GLCs, which defeat the purpose. What's the point of having a large sector of our economy driven by GLCs and government investment funds, when in all probability, as we have seen with 1MDB, which will come later, it is not operated as a pure independent private sector. Right. And the last part that I want to comment on the targets is the government's target to collect at least 31.4 billion annually from GST. Sekarang ini cukai yang dibayar sebelum GST diperkenalkan, for the SST cukai jualan, the collection is only about 10 to 11 billion per year for the cukai jualan. Now, Datuk Sri Najib is putting 31.4 billion collection per year, which means that padahal korang semua bayarlah lagi banyak cukai, 3 kali ganda. So expect higher prices, expect inflation actually to be higher than what is officially recorded, because in order to collect 31.4 billion and increasing, that means that more goods and services would have to be taxed, as it is the case in GST. That also means more peniaga, traders, shops that would have to be fined in order to collect the fines. That's how GST works anywhere in the world. So I hope that I give you an introduction. That's only introduction. Economics lecture is usually 2 hours. So that's only introduction. You see, I hope I give you a good introduction of how far we have missed the target in the last 15 years. In fact, we hardly achieved any target whatsoever. And I think that explains why there was hardly any excitement with the 11 Malaysian plan. Well, the other part of it is because on the day that Datuk Sri Najib was presenting 11 Malaysian plan, the one thing that took center stage was video Tan Sri Muhyiddin bocor tengah hentam Datuk Sri Najib. So that's partly it. But I think even without the video, there was hardly any excitement generated by 11 Malaysian plan, because been there, done that. We have heard it over and over again. The whole trust is basically a recycle issue. It's no longer about what this country needs to do. It's a question of who can deliver that. And certainly Barisan Nasional has been proven cannot be doing that for the last 15 years. Right. Now you know the performance. What do we do next? We need to see what went wrong and at least have a feeling about why all these plans and all these actions and money that have been plunged into our economy over the last 15 years failed to deliver the results. Because remember what Einstein said. One of the best quotations from Einstein that I have is this one. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Sebab itu kalau kita pakai model yang sama, cara yang sama, and then expect our economy to grow and be like other developed countries, itu namanya kerja orang gila. So that's why we need to know and we need to begin to understand what went wrong in the last 50 years. I would like to begin, Prof, by saying that I don't think this whole 5-year plan is suitable anymore to a country like ours. Adik-adik kena faham bahawa this whole idea about planning, 5-year plan, is very much identical to what the communist and socialist countries did in the 60s, in the 50s, you know. I thought that it was okay if you are at the stage where the private sector does not thrive, where it depends a lot on agricultural and commodities, then you can actually plan everything, because you need to make sure that you put enough money in the infrastructure so that the private investments come and slowly take over from the role of the government. So the 5-year plan would have been good in the 60s, in the 70s, and in the 80s. You know? Even then, there have been experiences of other countries which have given calamities when you are too obsessed with the centrally planned economies. I'm not sure how many of you studies China. China had the Great Leap Forward in the 50s and 60s that killed roughly 40 to 50 million people out of starvation. Because the central government in Beijing actually put a target of how much grains, how much agricultural produce that each region, each territory has to produce and contribute, and the target when it was set was politically manipulated, but it was also unrealistic, so much so that 40 to 50 million Chinese died in the process of making that great leap forward. In fact, it became great leap backwards during Mao Zedong's time. So I have reservation about very centrally planned economy, especially at the time when our country is one of the largest trading nations in the world. We are at the stage where what decides or what differentiates between our products, whether it can be marketed around the world or not, is no longer about what the government thinks. It is about how creative every single one of you can come up with the type of products, design, services that people in the UK, in China, in Japan would want to have. In the same way that how Korea has transformed their economy in the last 10-15 years, it's not so much about what the government in Seoul thinks they should be doing. It is about the Korean companies judging correctly what is the taste of the consumers in America, in Europe, in Africa, and anywhere in the world. So it is all about value and it's all about creativity, and you can't create an economy driven by creativity when everything has been set, driven, governed by approval, governed by allocation, governed by permits, the way Malaysian projects have been executed all along. So that's, I think, the very first problem with the whole grand design that we have now. The fact is, the 5-year plans is no longer relevant and invalid in this country at this junction. And then of course we have this great disconnect, as I mentioned before. I give you one good example that I think should be very relevant to you. How many of you are graduating very soon? There's only one. It is more first year student, okay, you see there's a big disconnect. Eh? You would hear last week Datuk Sri Najib telling the country that our unemployment rate is about 2%, and economically I'm sure you would have learned that 2% unemployment rate is more or less a zero unemployment. But what is unemployment? Unemployment is basically when people who want to find a job, try to find a job, couldn't get a job. That's unemployment. It's unemployment in the very traditional sense of meaning that economists have understood all this while. Is it relevant to your generation? I'm sure if you want to find a job, a lot of you who are not graduating can find a job. You can actually pergi goreng pisang tepi jalan. You can get a job. Not a problem. A year. 1 minute lagi. Belum masuk YMDB lagi lah. You give me about 5 to 10 minutes. So obviously, you know, the unemployment rate at 2% or the zero unemployment rate means nothing to all of you. Another set of data that I think a bit more telling about the reality now is 2 sets of data. Both of these you can basically pull out from the Treasury and official government numbers. Yeah? One number that I track very closely when it comes to labour market is the number of active registrants with the labour department seeking for jobs. These people are not necessarily people who could not find jobs. They might be in jobs now. For example, Datuk Saifuddin still have a job, but he wants a different job. So he can register to labour department. You have a lot of these people who actually have a different job but think that they deserve better and they want to upgrade. You know, the latest number published up to 2014 shows that at a particular time, there are 401,827 active job seekers. Out of that 401,827, 257,636 people are employees with at least diploma and higher, which means that more than half of these job seekers are basically graduates and diploma holders. I don't know, maybe salary tak cukup, or they're not doing the job they are meant to do, and so on. Now, you then match and transpose that number to a different set of number also published by government, which is the number of vacancies by industry and by qualifications. For the same period, there are 257,636 graduates and diploma holders looking for jobs or better jobs, but the available jobs is only for pengurus hanya ada 3,007, for professional hanya ada 21,672, for technicians and associate professionals only 13,000, more or less about less than 40,000. You see the mismatch? Most of the jobs, vacancies are basically elementary occupation, which is kerja buruh, and that's 534,000. So while you have a 2%, a near zero unemployment rate officially, the real situation that all of you have to face is that you could not find a job that suits you or that can pay the kind of education that you have. Sebab itu nanti jadi macam yang Professor Nazari tunjuk, I have 3 PhD but I will do anything for who. That's why, that's one disconnect. Okay. Since I have about 5 minutes left, so I have to go into, let's call self-declare. I have to go into the topics of which I think I need to touch a bit, which is the topic of governance and the topic which eventually lead us to 1MDB and the rest. So, if you know that the plan is no longer working, if you know that we have not reached our targets for the last 15 years, if you know there is a big disconnect, what do we do? How do we actually reach a developed nation that can ensure as low discrepancy as possible between different classes of people? I would like to suggest 3 immediate things that would have to be done radically. If you don't address these issues radically, and by radically I don't think anyone in Barisan Nasional can do this, because they are so set in the way they have been doing things for the last 60 years. So kalau Datuk Saifuddin wants to be Minister of Finance, you better get out of Barisan Nasional, because I think so long as you are in Barisan Nasional, I don't think you can do this, because the whole system has been geared against it. There are 3 most radical economic issues which I think we have to address if we were to achieve our targets. Number 1, the issue of governance. Why the issue of governance is important? Because it's about confidence. You see, we can no longer rely on our savings. We can no longer rely that our domestic consumption or what we do as a country and society will be enough to propel us further. We need to rely on others. This is an extremely interconnected world, and Professor Nazari has presented how much we depended on Chinese, on Singapore, on US and Europe and the rest of the world. How do you get people to come in and invest if they think that our government cannot account for 42 billion ringgit that they have borrowed from banks? How? If you go, if you are on a trade mission and you try to convince people come to Malaysia, create this job and so on, and they will say, I would rather go to Vietnam actually. Not only that they are more hardworking, actually their school is one of the best in the world compared to yours, and on top of that, your Prime Minister has not answered about that missing money. And why that missing 42 billion and 1MDB becomes central to economic issues and confidence? Because 42 billion ringgit can only be lost if the system is not working, if the institution fails. If you have a Bank Negara, if you have a Securities Commission, if you have policemen, everything all on watch guard, you will not lose 42 billion. You can only lose 42 billion because people who are supposed to look after that money sleeping on the job. I'm not saying that scandals do not exist in other countries. Enron, US had Enron's WorldCom and so on. What's the difference? The moment there was a fraud, when there was a scandal, all the institutions, all the authorities which were supposed to be doing something will come in and put it right. All those people found guilty and accountable to that fraud, they were all punished, they were all went to jail. That's the big difference between Malaysia and other countries. Janganlah gelap. But it's true, you know. So, I mean, don't come to me and say that corruption is everywhere. Don't give excuses that corruption happens in Singapore, in Indonesia. It's true. But the difference is, their institutions work. And when their institutions work, investors are confident of putting their money there, because when the judges are fair, when the courts are fair, they know that if they are wronged by anyone, they can always go to the courts and get their justice. Not in the case in this country. That's why, no matter what we do or what we say, we can spend years and years talking about economic planning until we fix the very institution's task to look after our rights and to make sure that people don't cross the line. If the referees are fraud in the first place, you can never have a fair match. As simple as that. Yeah? Jadi itu perkara yang pertama. Unless there is a... In fact, if I were given the chance to go, I wouldn't even be talking about economic planning anymore. I would just target on three things. Number one, on the governance. Number two, on education and talents. Because we can't be growing our economy when people are not confident that our workforce can compete. When the issue is still about English competency and how to improve our English competency. When year after year, the PISA, all the teams report shows our ranks go lower and lower and lower. I used to go to Vietnam, you know. Petronas has a lot of companies in Vietnam. I used to go there. Most of my staff are Vietnamese. I cannot imagine going there now when they say I should be the boss because my schools are top ranked in the world compared to yours. Vietnamese schools are top 10 in the world nowadays. Where is ours? You know? How do you convince people to come here? Number one. How do you make sure that the workforce that universities produce year after year are able to catch up with the demands and the needs of the global economy the same way that the Japanese, the European, the American, the Korean universities are producing their kids? So you can have whatever plans whatsoever, unless you have the right brain, the software to do it, you are not going anywhere. And therefore, there needs to be a radical shift in education, and that radical shift can only happen when you first liberate the universities. How do you want to get a high-class, top-class workforce when I can't even speak and Mike kena and it's on GST, it's not even on topic as sensitive as this. It's a simple GST question. How do you expect our workforce to be able to stand up to their masters or to their managers and bosses if they are not trained from the very beginning to stand up and tell their lecturers, I think, Professor, you are wrong. You are wrong because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I deserve a 10 points for that. How can they expect? And that goes to the lecturers here as well. You have a duty to make sure that you allow them the space to do it, and it's better for them to earn now because they have the space now than to earn in the future when they will make a lot of mistakes when they become CEO of one MDB. By then, too late. Okay. And last one is our problem, dependency on the foreign workers. Every year you hear this number of jobs, that number of jobs. And now this obsession with the low-cost foreign labours have translated into one of the saddest human tragedy. We have 1,500, 2,000 people floating, and more will come, because of the syndicate and because of the law of our economy, which was based and built on cheap labor for the last 34 years. Unless the government or any government is willing to take a radical step to say that we are going to stop foreign labours and phase them out within a matter of 5 to 10 years and make sure that businesses are willing to pay higher wages for locals, we are not going to solve any problem, because there is always that built-in comfort that it's better to take foreign labour than to train our own people. Then it becomes a catch-22, our workforce cannot find the job that they think they deserve, and we will continue to invite human calamities because we encourage human trafficking in the form of low labour cost that we have. So let me summarize this. 11 Malaysian plan, in my opinion, is nothing more than a series of projects costing 200 billion plus that are rolled out in the next 5 years in order to beef up the coffers of some connected people and cronies without any much impact to our economy, as how all the previous Malaysian plans have been proven. And if we are not careful, and reporters can quote me on this, if we are not careful, the whole projects of 11 Malaysian plan will be geared to make sure that it plugs off the losses of 1MDB. You will hear more and more 11 Malaysian plan being built around 1MDB lands in Sungai Besi, in Tun Razak Exchange, because more and more projects have to be created in order to add value to 1MDB so that it can cover the losses of 1MDB. I'm not surprised 5 years down the line, if I'm still in Parliament, that is, we will be going through of all the billions worth of projects that have been diverted to 1MDB in order to keep 1MDB. So, I think what is most important now is for us to keep the watch, to keep guard, because kalau tertidur sedikit saja, time and time again, it has been proven the money is lost. And it is most important for the public to understand, it is not so much of big announcements, it is about what is happening on the ground, whether or not we can feel the prosperity and economic growth. With that, thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking an extra 5 minutes, which have become 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we will open the floor for some questions. You can direct your questions to any one of the panelists. Please make your questions short and clear.
In terms of economical ideology, left, right, center, what is your approach in this application on Malaysia future plan?
I'm not sure if I have an economic ideology, but I will answer simply that I'm a social democrat. So I'm center, slightly to the left.
Hope that answers your question. Yes, please, the other side.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very honored to see three Macaws there. I'm the only one, I guess, in the audience. Okay, I got one question to Datuk Saifuddin regarding, he mentioned about consultancy in decision making. Consultation in decision making, that he would rather have it more than what it is now. How would you think that it can be practiced? Because as it is now, you can see that even if there is a lot of debates on certain issue, for example, the DST, the recent one would be the DST, or a 1MDB. Some portion or some part of the population will say this is so agenda, some ultra biasu, and so on. You know, as a result, people cannot give out their ideas, and people cannot articulate their ideas better. Yeah, so that's one. Another one, I would like to get some comments from Professor Nazari, because he's the dean, on the education sector. Now, recently I interviewed some new graduates coming out from university. I was looking for actually an account clerk, perhaps slightly better than normal account clerk, diploma level, just to keep in some financial data and also do reporting. But I found out that there are many graduates that actually apply. And people from University Utara, from people from UITM, and the most glaring part is that some of them come from accounting background, and also some with very, very funny field of study. One example is a Bachelor of Science in Decision Science, something like that, which I've never heard of it. And so you find that, of course, it's a mismatch. And I don't know what exactly that they study, because when I look at the transcript and all the details, all the details subject, it is it's like a rojak, you know. Everything is inside there, and you expect a person to be able to make a decision. So there should be a focus on the education sector from your view. What would be, how should be done, you know, in order to streamline or to actually have a focus on it. Otherwise, what Rafizi said just now, we don't have enough more manpower, or we don't have the quality manpower to propel our mission.
Okay, Datuk. Thank you. I think there are a couple of things that needs to be understood by all the people who are involved when it comes to consultation. First is, of course, what is the meaning, and number two, who are the stakeholders. We have to understand that we are living in a very different world. People want their voices heard, people want their roles recognized, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand that. Now, and that is why for every, I would say for every ministry, if I can give that as an example, for every government department and what have you, they have their specific stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? Say, for instance, in the education ministry, for instance, besides the ministers, the deputy ministers, and the civil servants, of course, stakeholders will include the academics. And if we are dealing about these teachers, then the stakeholders are teachers. And one of the stakeholders that where more often than not is missing from being invited to the consultation table are the real targets or the real constituent of that agency. So in the context of Ministry of Education, the real constituent is students and parents. So they should be consulted in the real sense of the word. But again, consultation, as I said, there are three principles. The principle of empowerment. So if it is in university, you must empower the MPP so that the MPP can act like student representative and not like prefects. And the student and the kesatuan kaki tangan, still the secretary general, the KKAUN must be empowered so that, or the president must be empowered so that their voices are heard. Now, and then when there is consultation, who represent who must be decided by the community. You can't have the vice chancellor saying, you represent the professor or you represent the student. No. It has to be the professors electing who represent them, the student representing who represent them. And when it comes to the third principle, participation, it has to be open and frank and candid perhaps, and making sure that decisions are made based on the consultation. You can't have a consultation where decisions are made outside the consultation. And because we are in university, and this comes to I remember this one. Like for instance, I mean, you can go into the nitty-gritty of what I'm going to say, but I'm just putting the basic points. If you want to say, for instance, appoint a vice chancellor, and if you say the system is that candidates have to go through being interviewed by the search committee, you can question who is the search committee. Itu cerita nombor 49 lah. Yeah? But when you appoint someone as vice chancellor whose name is not through the search committee, that's corruption at the highest level. And it happens in the appointment of a vice chancellor, for example. Yeah? But it happened once. So this is where consultation was really no point. And you don't expect people to trust you if you invite people for consultation the next time. So you have to be open, you have to be frank about it. And we have to really build a system and understanding of how we do consultation in the most productive manner. Thank you.
Okay, to answer the question about this thing about the student with research science. By the way, research science is actually very respectable, if not very prestigious degree. It's very complex degree and very popular in the States. So I wouldn't complain about students who graduate in research sciences. Secondly, sometimes we know that students, they are here to be trained to think. And in many cases, they come out and they go to different professions. They do very well except for certain professions, medical and accountancy, professional qualifications. Some other jobs actually require people can think properly. For example, look at our friend here, Rafizi. He graduated in chemical engineering and electronic engineering, and now he's a politician. So as long as he's able to think critically, he can perform in tasks. So I think we train people to think critically and be open in their thinking, in their thought processes. That should be the role of the university, more than just to develop skills. Questions?
If I may go back to the topic. In 2013, John Marican said that one in 10 tertiary graduates leave Malaysia to work elsewhere outside the country. Do you think this has an impact towards academic planning in terms of, is it a big worry, the brain drain situation? And if it's not, where is spending millions bringing them back? That's basically my question. Is it a big deal, and does it fall into a very critical area in economic planning or whatever is happening in the economy?
Do you want to direct a question to any particular panelist?
Probably the academic and Rafizi.
Okay, we'll start with YB.
It is perhaps the most important, because we are at a stage where our growth no longer depends on infrastructure. You can build as many Tabungani towers, but it's not going to pay for the future. What pays for the future is the type of people who can produce and come up with ideas and products and services that we can sell all over the world. So that's why we in dire need of good achievements and something that we can be proud of, that is created by our locally bred, local businesses. To give you one example, the thumb drive. This is the example that have always been used to illustrate how much Malaysia has lost because of the brain drain. The thumb drive. The thumb drive was actually invented by a Malaysian who eventually opened a company in Taiwan and became one of the basic building blocks that then put Taiwan ahead of even other countries in the West when it comes to electronics. It put Taiwan and it drove Taiwan's economy for a good 2 decades, and part of the building blocks was actually the thumb drive and all these people. One wonders, how would it happen? What it would have been if that Malaysian actually came back or did not leave the country instead of going to Taiwan, stayed in this country and grew that business, and people would have remembered that Malaysia invented a thumb drive. If in the last 10, 15 years the concern is pure innovation and growth like that, the concern now has even descended to an even more alarming rate, because even our normal skilled professionals, and these are not people who are going to invent things, these are your chemical engineers, these are your accountants, these are your bankers, even these professionals have left the country, partly because they think there is a better prospect overseas, partly because they think that their children has better future overseas. And more, there are Malays like these going, and not just Chinese or Indians, So that's why I think UN's report about 2 years ago actually put brain drain as one of the biggest obstacles to Malaysian economy. I don't think anyone disputes that. Even if you put Datuk Sri Najib here, he would admit that we have a big problem with brain drain. The real issue is, how do you actually address it? Does putting Johan Malikan going around the country, having around the world on a free trip, so-called doing all these career exhibitions, does that worth the investments that we put in? How much money the public has to pay for every single talent that we bring back? I actually have a slightly different view about that. While I think that you need to have a program to bring people back, but I don't think you should spend that much money, nor do I think that that's the reason why people leave Malaysia. People leave Malaysia because they feel that they have no prospect. People leave Malaysia because they think that their children have better future overseas. People leave Malaysia because they are fed up. So it will go back to that basic thing about confidence, about a sense of fairness, about justice, about positiveness, about how this country is heading. And that's where we will be in trouble. Because over the last 1 or 2 years, since 2013, the confidence in the country's direction plummets even further and further by the day. And I think the latest survey, if you track Merdeka Centre's survey, the latest survey would have would have come down to, I think, a low 40s from the 60s. So when people are not confident in the future of the country, Obviously, the good ones, the brainy ones, people who can get a good job overseas will say, I'm better off overseas, so might as well I go overseas. And this from the years of the 80s and 90s where when it deprived the country of innovation, now it comes to a point, it deprives the country of skilled workers. So it will go back to the issue of inclusiveness, it will go back to the issue of sense of justice and fairness, and unless you convince the public and Malaysian diaspora overseas that things are well, I don't think you're going to attract them no matter how many times you send Johan Marikan overseas. And to cap it off, if you go to Penang now, I have some different opinions about how development in Penang is and so on. But there is one thing that you cannot deny about Penang Island when you go to Penang Island. It's growing in a sense of excitement. Things are happening, there's rejuvenation. Do you think that is all because Guan Eng or the AP government or Pakatan government meddle in every single thing? It's not. The reason why it happens is because people come back. People overseas, investors, Malaysians, everywhere, they go to Penang in order to join, the excitement to make it better. So it is that excitement. And where does the excitement come? Because of the confidence in the transparency and openness of the government. It's not much that the Chief Minister has to do, only to convince the public that here we don't take money, we will allow you to do what's necessary, and I think that's enough. Penang has proven it. If only Datuk Sri Najib can actually learn one or two things about confidence building from the Pakatan Rakyat government in Penang, I think we will solve a lot of problems on the trade. Allah.
That is a political version of the answer. My own take on it is that it takes a lot for a person to leave the country because it's actually leaving your tanah bandara. Most people find it very, very difficult to leave the kampung, etc. country. So there must be something wrong, something very attractive out there. And therefore, it's an area of concern. We have to be very concerned. Why are people living finding outside that is more attractive? Having said that, it's not a phenomenon that only applies to Malaysia. It actually also applies to Singapore, by the way. Many Malaysians go to Singapore, but many Singaporeans want to leave the country. A survey done a couple of years ago is that half of young people plan to leave the country. I think after they retire or before they retire, they like to work. They have money, but they want to leave the country after they retire. Because during the productive years, they want to stay in Singapore. So in that case, investment is good. But they want to leave after a while because they feel that life is very difficult, etc. So there's something wrong there as well. So that's something which we should also focus on. And lastly, I would say that we have to make sure that our citizens also feel very concerned about the country, that such that even though things are very attractive out there, they still want to stay in this country so that they want to make things better for their community, for their family, and for their society. If it is all about money, then maybe out there is attractive in other countries, but we should instill in our young people that it's not all about money and comfortable life. It's also about improving your own society. And I think that's something which we also should instill and teach our future generation.
So you have a political answer, you have an academic answer, there is an administrative answer. I agree with all those, but I want to add two more. Very, very, very briefly. I won't go into detail. One, we seem to worry about getting people back. But I think as much as we have to do that, I think we should also avoid people leaving. And when I say avoid people leaving is, if there are graduates of 60 high schools who feel that they couldn't go for higher education in Malaysia and they have to go overseas, don't you think that makes it so difficult to get them back? I have always been saying we need to review and give due recognition. Yes, there must be a lot of negotiation. Do you easy? I mean, why are you talking about people, asking people to come back? You made these people go, man. Am I right? Now you ask them to come back. Now somebody will then say, Saifuddin, dah bukan Melayu. Second, we need to protect talent. And I give you a simple example. My old senior brother, Raja Ahmad, is in the hall. He is in, among others, publishing industry. And you need printing. And you need people who knows how to do quality printing for book industry to flourish. We need some kind of regulatory intervention to protect talents so that people who study printing related discipline get job in the printing industry. Otherwise, without regulatory intervention, any Tom, Dick, and Harry who don't study about printing, can you see where I'm coming from? Can get a job. And these people who qualify couldn't get a job because the publisher, the printer, wants workers who, as long he can print, man the machine, and then pay them lower wage. You don't even understand, the worker who don't even understand color codes. When you say blue, it can be two kinds of blue. Dark blue, BN. Less blue, pakai tan.
Thank you. This is just a few days ago I read a statement, I think from the Minister of Education, said that in 30 or 40 years, Malaysia will have a world-class education system. I thought we had a world-class education system the last 30 or 40 years ago. Next question, please.
Yeah. Can we on this side? Yeah. Okay.
Assalamualaikum and good evening. I'm one of the final students of this faculty. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, so basically I want to touch on governance that YB Rafizi has talked about, and we touch on 1MDB. If we look back in history, we actually have another scandal which is PFZ. And it's very familiar with 1MDB in that its failure is due to land acquisition at higher than market price as well as cost override. It shows that there's no governance in the project implementation. Okay, and then we know that these two big companies are audited by the big four auditors, which are external auditors, and then it has happened twice. So I want to ask YB Rafizi, how independent are our external auditors as well as what's being done in terms of regulatory in our regulation to ensure that all these government agencies, they do not bypass the independence of external auditors, that we have confidence in all these auditors. Yeah, thank you.
I started my life as an external auditor. And I think all of you, a lot of you are financial accounting students, so you would have covered audits. Audits are never meant to guarantee that there is no fraud. Audits have always been on samples, Auditors come in based on certain standards, and auditors will make a judgment. And that's why there are two parts of auditing professions. Number one is the technical standard, the financial reporting and so on. The others are the audit standards, which also govern question of integrity, a question of independence and so on. There is so much that you can put in the so-called auditing profession that can limit or mitigate the risk of fraud. Even then, the biggest frauds in the world over the last 40, 50 years were all audited by the biggest firms in the world. So it's not so much a question of auditors or firms, it's a question of values and integrity. Now, what is missing in this country, if I may say, is not just a question of auditing firms or auditors. Actually, I think we are a very tribalistic society, and our system is as such that once someone is in power, it's very difficult to say no to him or her. So you will find it whether in audit, whether even in music industry, anywhere it's like that. Boss is always true and so on. What makes things worse in this country when it comes to audits, I think, because it's very much monopolized by the Big Four. And at the same time, a lot of the biggest clients are either government clients or GLCs related. And because of the intertwining and how involved the government and politicians in the business, if you actually step on someone's toes, it's very easy to switch from KPMG to Ernst & Young, and KPMG will be deprived. So that is the unique part of Malaysian auditing scene, which I think made it even more prone to scandals. I'm not saying that they are corrupt or fraud. Far from it. Some of them were my best of friends. I have a lot of friends in the audit firm. They were partners and so on. I understand their limitations. There are, unfortunately, because of the dominance of the businesses, politicians, and businesses connected to politicians, I think auditors in Malaysia think twice about doing anything, whistleblowing or doing something like that. So, because of that, audits in Malaysia, I suppose, will try to hover on the fringe of the standards as much as possible. I don't think external auditors in Malaysia, it's very difficult for them to actually have that inquisitive whistleblowing approach and say that I'm going to do a lot more than what is required of me by the standards. I'm going to dig, I'm going to find out if money has been lost, I'm going to report. I don't think you'll find something like that. Obviously, this is in any case when I was in Petronas, they will come to me and say, look, this well is not, it's tak boleh ni, that this well is no longer economical, it's been dry well and so on. Can we write it off? I will go and check out, okay, these are the reasons why it cannot be written off. I'm going to do A, B, C, and I, and they'll say, I'm satisfied, it shouldn't be written off, So, because of the connectivity and so on, it's harder for the auditors in Malaysia to be independent as the public expects them to be. And to finish it off, I trained at a medium firm size in the UK. I made a conscious decision not to go to the big firms because I was an engineer. If I were to enroll and get a job and train with the big firms, I'd be lost because I was an engineer. I needed a firm where I could learn from A to Z. In the UK, there are a lot of mid-sized firms and small firms, and the monopoly of the big four is not as bad as the ones in this country. Because of that, the big firms actually tend to be more competitive and they tend to be more independent, in my opinion, compared to the situation in Malaysia, because in Malaysia, you can hardly survive if you are medium or small firms. You are either a big firm or you are nothing, or you just end up doing GST returns. So that is something that I think the Malaysian Institute of Accountants and the regulatory bodies and the authorities have to look into whether or not it's time to start thinking about limiting the monopoly of the audit firms. Thank you very much.
It is 11 p.m. Maybe we'll take one last question. Okay?
My name is Adam. I'm from Computer Science Faculty. I have this one question to Dr. Saifuddin. We're talking about inclusiveness, but why does these two states of Pakatan is not included in the 11 MPs plan? That's one question for you. My second question is to Rafizi. We're talking about household indebtedness problem, issues, critics from the RMK10, declining education quality and labor, unequal distribution of wealth and income, and then comes up with the past issues when we see KMZ, we ingat pelabuhan. When we see about Perwaja Steel, we nampak kilang batu terdampar kat Kemaman. When we talk about right now, GST issues, mahal, and then 1MDB, ternampak jolo menari, saudara. And then tabung haji, Kapal Hidup Melayu. So, but right now, 11 MPs, we see that like the 1C, the Malaysia Youth, and another one is the Boji Air. The One Malaysia Youth plan is costly like 100 million. And then another one is the water treatment plant, which is I saw greatly shocked about it because it's costly like around 10 billion. They put it giving some fund around 10 billion. So my question to YB Rafizi is it all the plan in the 11 MPs going to be another failure, multiple failure?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I request the panelists to give brief answers.
But I will request Professor Nazari to help me on this one because I don't want to make a political answer to a very important question. The question is why Sono and Penang is left out from the 11 Malaysia plan. Not that I see it in the report that I read, but probably if you are referring to examples of projects that was announced, and that is another story. But I would ask Nazari, Professor Nazari, if because I did notice that. Except I think if it is about announcement of projects, then, and even that Tan Sri Anwar Musa is not happy because Cathay is not getting anything. When actually get almost everything. So there is always that issue about when it comes to projects. Thank you.
Well, it's going to be short because unless we change the way we do things, we fortify our institutions, it's just going to be a repeat and repeat and repeat, and that's why I quoted Einstein. It's insanity to continue doing this because we already know what the outcome will be. The only difference is that what will be the final bill to the rakyat eventually when this government is replaced. That's the only thing. Otherwise, it will just pile up and pile up and pile up on the debts. And then Professor Nazari thinks that by 2020 to 2020 will hit 1 trillion. I think that's the only difference. How much there is left. Sebab itu, ini saya selalu buat lawak, gajah mati meninggalkan gading, harimau mati meninggalkan belang, UMNO mati meninggalkan hutang.
Yeah, one last question.
One short question. Okay, one short question. YB Rafizi. Back to the issue, 11 Malaysia plan. A plan is a plan. The implementation is another thing. So, if along the way something goes wrong during the implementation, who actually is accountable? In other words, where does the buck stop? Who actually is responsible when the plan doesn't work as it's supposed to be? There's one head of a Malaysian political party says that, keep him until the end, so that the voters will decide. Which is the better option? Does the head of the implementation take responsibility, or let the voters decide? Thank you.
Actually, as it is, there is no mechanism for us to know whether things go wrong or not. Now, there are two parts of Malaysian plans, whether it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 Malaysian plans. There are the macroeconomic targets, the economic growth target and income and so on, which I think is quite easy for us to monitor. So we always bang in the parliament all the time because we track this closely. But I think the most difficult part of the Malaysian plans, and in fact the most lucrative part of it, is actually the projects. And in 11 Malaysian plan, there will be 230 billion worth of projects allocated. Now for this one, there is no way whatsoever to figure out what went wrong or when what went wrong until and unless either one of these two things happened. Either it was picked up by the Auditor's General's report and then it was followed up, or either there was a whistleblower's or media report and so on. If there are 230 billion worth of projects, that would be hundreds and hundreds of projects, you know. I think the possibility that those projects are reviewed and picked up by Auditors General or by whistleblowers, out of thousands of projects, maybe only 10 or 15. And we've seen that in the 9 Malaysian Plan. The 9 Malaysian Plan, one of the foremost projects was NFC. And of so many projects in the 9 Malaysian Plan, the ones that really get the attention of the public was NFC. And the rest actually just hilang tenggelam, God knows what. And so, my answer to you is that I don't think we can even discuss about who should be accountable. Whether Datuk Seri Najib should be accountable, whether the head of the ministry should be accountable, whether the project owner should be accountable, because there is no system to account in the first place. Once the project is announced in the Malaysian Plan, it will then be devolved to be administered and implemented by the ministries, and the ministries will go on unless and until either one of the two things that I mentioned take place. And in all probability, it's very difficult to take place. So that's why in Parliament, we are pushing now for select committees, so that you will have a select committee that can review all these projects. We are also pushing for a midterm review, because the current midterm review of the Malaysian Plan is a macro review of how far, and you hear all the good things, we are, our current surplus our ringgit strengthened, but you don't know what happens to that 230 billion ringgit every year. So to answer your question, for the time being, unless things change, no one is going to be accountable, in much the same way Shariza and her husband are still owning the condos and living with the lemurs.
Okay, thank you very much. We have come to the end of the forum. I declare at the beginning that it's a great success. I think the forum has been a roaring success. I think all the panelists presented, to a certain extent, actually what is obvious. What is obvious are the problems of the plan and these wider issues of the plan. Problems are quite obvious, and the solutions are even more obvious. Okay? It is just the will to do it. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank our guests, Datuk Saifuddin, YB Rafizi. He has to attend Parliament tomorrow. I got class tomorrow morning. So thank you very much for coming, and hope to do it again. Thank you.